So I returned to the bench that I've talked about in the previous chapter to read mainly. I also came back here to do sketch designs for the brand, and it just felt meaningful to me to come to this bench as part of that new stage in my life. And synchronicities also occurred here that were connected to what happened in September. So, subsequent to the experience at that restaurant, I ran into one of the staff members, had a synchronicity with her. Had never seen her prior, and haven't seen her since in terms of a synchronicity. But then came to this bench to read one day subsequent to that occurrence, not prior, and it's never happened since. And in front of the bench there was a huge picnic with a lot of the staff, including the person who came and asked me if I was alright that night. And it was just so unusual because it happened in the period immediately after the occurrence, and it was immediately in front of this bench. So the other thing that occurred is the person. So you'll see the plaque down there, because each of these benches, as I've said, is remember someone who passed. This guy's a comic artist, and it just felt meaningful for me to just kind of explore further into his name. And then he's got a 3-word name. The final letters of his name spell out the name of a skateboarder who is now deceased, who there are murals up of him all around the area. And I would pay my respects to those murals, and they became significant in terms of my morning ritual. The letters of the final letters of each of the names of this guy on the plaque here spell out the shortened version of the skateboarder's name, who is most often known by that shortened version. And so one day someone was sitting here, and I just felt compelled to approach the person and say, "This is a special seat," etc. And suddenly, I didn't even see or hear this jogger coming. I've turned after speaking to this person to walk off, and a jogger who has a snake tattoo on their calf muscle, when I turned, we synced perfectly so that his calf muscle appeared to me as soon as I turned. It's an unusual, not an unusual spot for a tattoo, but it's not the easiest tattoo to spot, especially if someone's jogging. But it was so perfectly synced, and snakes were one of the animal symbols that were significant to me and continue to be, but not just in tattoo form, in a variety of forms. And then I walked further up to an organic food store that way, and that shortened version of the name that the final letters of this guy's 3 names spell were all over this building site, because the name of the company is also that word. So it may not seem significant to you as a viewer, but it was incredibly resonant and meaningful to me at that time, and that then intensified over time. So there were other animal symbols that I'll talk about in future episodes, but here's one of them that will be discussed in this one. Okay. So I did a lot of walking pre-September as well upon arriving in Melbourne. It was just something I felt compelled to do, just to explore on foot the inner north of Melbourne. And I would consistently find myself encountering graffiti art like this one, because there's a lot of captivating, strong images of women and girls throughout the inner north of Melbourne, and so that influence also tapped into who I already was. And interestingly, this particular one is just next to a piece by an artist called Dash, who, if you've watched the previous chapter, is an artist I had a number of synchronicities over an extended period of time. And so owls were one of the animal symbols that were especially significant post-September. And graffiti such as that would appear at particular times in resonance with what I was thinking and what was going on, and would appear during synchronicities where other things would be happening. And not just those owls, which are in many places in the inner north of Melbourne, but other owl graffitis, owls in the form of t-shirts, clothing, in shop windows, soft toys, but ultimately, and this is why graffiti is a big part of inward markings, they enabled synchronicities, and if you like, communication from something beyond the individual. So, and because it's publicly accessible, free, etc., it allows for that facilitation. If it was about art, locked behind doors, etc., then it wouldn't work. So there's that. Okay, so in the context of this vlog series, my third trance-like state, the best way I can describe it, commenced post-September 2018. And I would get up around this time, like the break of the day, a bit earlier maybe, and because I'd spend a couple of hours at home first, like listening to music and just writing down heaps of stuff that just came to me like in waves upon waking every morning. And I'd write them down in a book, and I'd post a lot of it to social media. And if anyone looks at my social media history, that they'll see around that period of time that there was a lot going on. And so kind of when the light was coming up, I would walk down a street called Noon Street. That's just the way that felt right. And Noon Street became something meaningful to me because it can also be N-O-O-N-E, can also be read as no one. So especially at that time, the concept of, I guess, loss of ego and the questioning the idea of the self, etc., was meaningful. So I like the idea of No One Street, walking along No One Street as part of this, what I came to call a ritual, a morning ritual. And so, as I've mentioned, my perception on the world had been overhauled, if you like. It was like, as some people have said, having the reset button on a computer activated. And so the world around me just became something different, new, refreshed. And so I would walk across the bridge that I'm on every morning, and as part of like the increasing, like the meaningfulness of numbers and symbols and so forth, this river then became symbolic of where my life had progressed up to until then. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks. And so there were there's a few rocky bits and a bit of kind of roughness, if you like, along that first stretch, and then it comes under the bridge, And then you see this major like interruption where things split into two, and there's more tumultuousness, if you like, and then it eventually, the paths reunite again and flow into the kind of the calmness at the end. And for me, it felt like I'd finally reached that calm point at the end, because the meditative state that I'd been in since February 2018 just became further enhanced, if you like, post-September. But then, as part of that, was the added intensity of the new perception that I was experiencing. So the place that I would then eventually reach is somewhere that I'd never been to before in my life, and everyone I've talked to about it since September, even people who've grown up in Melbourne, lived in this area all their life, have not heard of it either, and we'll go there now. Okay, so please excuse my somewhat unkempt appearance, but I had to rush down here to try and come to this place, even though it's rarely frequented, to avoid as many people as possible. So when I talk about the third trance-like state in the context of this vlog, post that experience in September, where the premonitionary dream of mid-2017 became known to me as premonitionary. I would wake up between 3 and 4 a.m. in the morning, every morning apart from about 5 between September and February. And not because I set an alarm or anything like that, my body would just wake up during that time frame. And I'd listen to music for a couple of hours, so Taylor Swift, The Jealous Sound and Sunday's Best, do a bit of housework, and then walk down Noon/No One Street to the place that I'm in now, which is called Deep Rock. Now, Deep Rock is somewhere that I did not even know existed, even though I'd lived in Melbourne for nearly 2 decades prior. And yeah, I don't speak to people who know of it either, which blows me away because of people's history with the area. And it's not difficult to get to. It's not a recent development. It's got a historical significance, like there used to be diving events here. So yeah, it's just it's kind of like this little pocket that I don't know, maybe it's in some kind of vortex. This was around the time when symbolism and numbers became very significant to me, and them being signs of the universe, and the universe very much leading me to discover this place. And so in terms of the animal symbolism, I would sit at the location that I'm filming now and came to be entranced by, you may see it here, the reflection on the water, which occurs only during particular days, made the rock kind of surface in that section appear like a phoenix to me, because of the doubling effect that the water has. And phoenix was a less prominent symbol during that time, but it became meaningful. And then directly above, I hope you can see it, is a gnarled branch that looks exactly like a snake, especially a python, I guess. And so I just became entranced by both the phoenix and the snake, especially because they had resonance with what was happening in my life outside of Deep Rock. And then one day I noticed, to a few meters to the right of the snake, and you won't be able to see it, the very thin, let me just put this back down here, the very thin end of one of the branches, the wind had blown it in a way, these two prongs, so that they formed a heart shape. it was astonishing to see, because I don't think I've ever seen that before. Maybe it was just the headspace I was in, but yeah, it was reaffirming, because for want of a better term, I felt this deep sense of kind of a universal love during that time, and that was only further kind of enhanced by the experience in September. And so coming down here and seeing that, it felt reassuring. It felt like this deep sense that I had of needing to seek something or someone out was valid, and that it was based in a sense of love. This was also the time when birds started to resonate with my thinking, and I'll talk about in a later vlog the significance of birds and feathers. But as outlandish as it sounds, because there was so much thinking and connecting going on, because after the rearrangement of my brain and my further kind of reset perspective on the world, there was just in line with sort of all the thoughts that I'd get flooded with upon waking, there was just so much firing in my brain. Even though I was in that meditative state that I previously described, there was something else going on kind of in the midst of that. And it was, I think part of it was like trying to get a grasp on what was occurring, but the other part of it was like this inspired creative process of just ideas, concepts that were all connected to who I was and my history. And so, and also the wondering about, okay, what is it that I'm seeking out? And so, but sometimes it would be birds like flying off, like in the gap above that ridge there. But most significantly, it would be ducks and I think ibises and other birds that would fly across the length of the river. You should be able to see what I'm talking about. And they would fly directly across my sight line in a straight line during particular times. And it would be resonant, like with other signs from the universe that I continue to receive, with my thinking. And that was also reassuring. And so coming down here was was communing, I guess. It was a direct engagement with the universe for me. So this place was very special, and I came to see it as ritualistic. And I'd never really used the word ritual before that time. I also saw animals here, so I will talk about that in the next vlog. Actually, instead of the next vlog, let's just do it now, because I've managed to clear some space in my memory. So, oh, for God's sake, the hair never really works out. The animals that I saw here, the actual animals, which it was the timing. It's like with all of this stuff, it's the timing and the resonance. It's not just, oh, that was a funny thing to occur, or that was a nice thing to have experienced. There's been a significant meaning. So I was sitting here at the exact time that an eel popped out of that water, and then walking back along the bridge out of here, an eel also splashed up at the exact time that I was crossing. I saw, I've seen a fox across on the other bank. I've seen a wallaby across on that other bank. I was here when a kookaburra sounded across there. And if you come down here regularly, you'll know that kookaburras I think that is the only time in that whole period that I heard kookaburras. I can't remember if it was one or two foxes that I saw across there. I also saw, only because I had to take a pee across there, I saw a creature like wrapped around a branch like a caterpillar, but a big furry creature, or you know, small to medium-sized fairy creature that looked like a possum, but it was like no other possum I'd ever seen. And it was like it was frozen or in hibernation, just wrapped around this branch. Didn't startle when I was right next to it or near it. And I wasn't taking photos of things that I should have back then. I might have to look through, because I didn't have a smartphone then. I only had this tiny, like really basic device, and yeah, maybe I just didn't have it with me. God, am I forgetting anything else? Wallaby, fox, lizards, like significantly sized lizards, eels, and that possum-like creature. Yeah, there might be others, but yeah, as hopefully you get the impression, this place became very special to me and still is. And strangely, it was significant to come down here every morning for that period of time, but then there was a end point. There was a point where I felt like it wasn't as important anymore, and I have only come down here like a few times since February, and this is where the ideas for the brand came together over time, and it was during that September to February period. And in the subsequent chapters I will talk about that process in detail. Thank you.